Tonight, we will explore letting go. We are speaking of something very ordinary, not giving things away, not pushing thoughts out, simply the gentle easing of the hand that has been holding too tightly. Letting go, as we mean it tonight, is the quiet permission to stop gripping what is already passing. Moments, expectations, versions of ourselves, even the wish to understand. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. There is nothing to remember, nothing you need to carry with you through the night. There is no need to stay awake. You can simply listen. You may drift in and out. It's okay if parts are missed. It's okay if sleep arrives early, or late, or many times. We will be here either way. Long ago, in a small riverside village, there lived a basket weaver named Haruto. Haruto was known for his careful hands. Each reed was chosen slowly. Each basket was firm, even, dependable. People trusted his work. They said his baskets could carry anything without breaking. Haruto himself took pride in this. Not loudly, quietly. He believed that holding things well was the mark of a good life. He held his tools carefully. He held his reputation carefully. He held his plans carefully, imagining how many baskets he would make next season, and the season after that. Every morning, he walked the same path to the river to soak his reeds. Every evening, he stacked finished baskets in neat rows by the door, and for many years, this brought him a sense of steadiness. One spring, after heavy rains, the river changed its course. It did not announce itself. It did not ask permission. One night, while Haruto slept, the water rose and pressed against the bank, quietly reshaping the edge of the village. By morning, the place where Haruto soaked his reeds was gone. The path ended in broken mud. The water moved differently now, faster, deeper, unfamiliar. Haruto stood there a long time. He did not shout. He did not panic. But something inside him tightened. For days, he searched for another place along the river. Each spot felt wrong, too shallow, too exposed, too far. His baskets began to pile up unfinished. The reeds dried too quickly. The rhythm he trusted was gone. At night, he lay awake thinking, if I can just find the right place again, everything will return to how it was. This is a thought many of us know. If this one thing would settle, if this one change would reverse, if this one loss could be undone. Haruto began to work harder. He woke earlier. He stayed later by the water. He tried to force the old rhythm into the new river. The baskets he made during this time were still good, but his hands ached. His shoulders stayed tense even in rest. One afternoon, an elderly traveler named Michiko stopped by Haruto's workshop. She carried very little. A small bundle. A walking stick worn smooth by years of use. She watched Haruto weave in silence for a long while. Finally, she said, "Your hands know how to hold. They do not yet know how to release." Haruto felt a flash of irritation. He did not look up. "I have nothing to release," he said. "The river has taken enough." Michiko nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "The river always takes," she said, "and we are always surprised." She stayed only one night, in the morning, before leaving. She placed one of Haruto's unfinished baskets back into the water, right at the new edge of the river. Haruto saw this and felt a jolt of alarm. "That basket isn't finished," he said. Michiko smiled gently. "No," she said, "it isn't." The basket drifted for a moment, caught on a stone, then slowly filled and sank. Haruto watched until it disappeared. Nothing dramatic happened inside him. No sudden insight, just a quiet, hollow feeling, like an exhale he had been holding back for a long time. After Michiko left, Haruto sat by the river for hours, not searching, not planning, just sitting. He noticed how the water did not try to be yesterday's water. It did not cling to the old bank. It moved, carrying branches, leaves, fragments of what once stood firm. The river was not careless. It was thorough. In the days that followed, Haruto began to work differently. He did not rush to replace the old soaking place. He tried smaller batches of reeds. Some baskets failed. Some were oddly shaped. He let them be. What changed most was not the river, but his grip. He stopped insisting that his hands repeat what they once knew. He allowed them to learn again. Letting go, as Haruto discovered, was not an action. It was the end of a certain effort. Often we imagine letting go as something we must do correctly, as if there is a right moment, a right method. But more often, it is something that happens when we grow tired of holding. We hold ideas about how things should feel, how evening should sound, how our lives should unfold by now. We hold memories as if they could anchor us. We hold worries as if vigilance could prevent loss. And slowly, without noticing, our hands ache. Letting go does not mean forgetting what mattered. Haruto did not forget his old riverbank. He did not pretend it never existed. He simply stopped demanding that the river return it. In our own lives, this might look very small. Allowing a conversation to remain unfinished, letting a day be unproductive without judgment, not replaying a moment that cannot be corrected. You may notice, as we speak of this, that the body understands before the mind does. There can be a softening that happens without explanation. It's okay if that softening comes and goes. Haruto's baskets, over time, became different. They were lighter, more open in their weave, not designed to carry everything. Some villagers complained, others liked them better. Haruto listened, nodded, and kept working. One evening, as the sun lowered over the changed river, he realized he no longer felt the tightness in his chest when he approached the water. The river was no longer something to solve. It was simply where he worked now. This is often how letting go reveals itself, not as relief, but as neutrality. The absence of resistance. When we stop holding, what remains is often quieter than we expect. There is more space, more room for sleep to arrive on its own time. As the night continues, we may notice thoughts loosening their edges, or not. Either way is fine. We are not practicing letting go. We are allowing it to happen, or not happen, without concern. The river moves. The hands learn. The night deepens, and we remain here, together, with nothing to carry forward. As the nights passed in that village, the sound of the river became part of Haruto's sleep. Not louder, not softer, simply present. Some evenings he noticed it clearly. Other nights it faded into the background, like a familiar voice in another room. This, too, was a kind of letting go. There is a way we try to hold awareness itself, to keep track, to stay present, to not miss anything important. But the night does not require our attention. It unfolds whether we follow it or not. Not far from Haruto's village, in the hills where the paths narrowed and the air cooled more quickly at dusk, there lived a woman named Annika. Annika tended a small shrine at the edge of a cedar grove. It was not a famous place. No pilgrims arrived. No offerings piled up. She swept fallen needles each morning. She refilled the water bowls. She replaced candles when they burned down to nothing. For many years, Annika believed her task was to preserve the shrine exactly as it was. She repaired cracks in the stone. She tied loose branches back into place. She gently corrected visitors who moved things without care. She felt responsible not only for the shrine, but for the feeling it gave people. Quiet, orderly, unchanged. One autumn, a storm moved through the hills with unusual force. Trees fell. Paths washed away. When Annika reached the shrine afterward, part of the roof had collapsed. Leaves and rainwater covered the floor. The central stone was chipped. She stood there in the damp silence, feeling something close around her ribs. For days, she worked without rest. She gathered stones. She patched the roof as best she could. She tried to return the shrine to its former shape. But the materials were wrong. The weather uncooperative. Each repair seemed temporary. A monk named Tenzin, traveling through the hills, stopped to rest one afternoon and watched her struggle with a warped beam. "You are very loyal," he said gently. Annika did not stop working. "This place deserves care," she replied. "If I let it fall apart, I have failed it." Tenzin sat on a stone nearby. "Perhaps," he said, "it does not need to be held together." Annika felt a sharpness rise in her chest. "If I do nothing," she said, "there will be nothing left." Tenzin nodded slowly. "And if you hold too tightly," he said, "what remains may not be alive." That evening, after the monk continued on his way, Annika sat alone in the half-repaired shrine. Rain began again, softly this time. She noticed how the water pooled in places she had not expected, how it traced new lines along the stone. She noticed how quiet it was when she stopped moving. The shrine was no longer what it had been. That was already true, whether she accepted it or not. For the first time since the storm, she did not try to fix anything. She sat until the light faded. In the weeks that followed, Annika changed her care. She still swept. She still tended the candles. But she did not rebuild the roof completely. She allowed the open places to remain. Visitors came less often, but those who did lingered longer. They stood under the broken roof and listened to rain fall directly onto stone. Annika discovered that what she had been protecting was not the shrine itself, but her idea of it. When that loosened, something simpler remained. We often confuse holding with caring. We believe that if we stop controlling, something precious will be lost forever. But much of what we grip is already changing beneath our hands. Letting go does not mean neglect. It means responding to what is here, rather than insisting on what was. In the quiet of the night, this understanding does not need to be complete. It does not need to resolve into a clear thought. It can exist as a feeling of less effort, a softening of the jaw, a slackening of the shoulders, or simply a willingness to rest without finishing anything. There is a man named Elias who once came to a teacher asking how to let go of his worries. The teacher listened patiently. Elias spoke of responsibilities, of mistakes, of futures that felt heavy and close. When he finished, the teacher said only, "You are holding tomorrow with tonight's hands." Elias did not understand this at first. He thought about it for many days. Then, one evening, sitting alone as the sky darkened, he realized how tired his hands felt. Not physically, but in the way a person feels after gripping something for too long. Letting go often begins there, with weariness. Not the exhaustion that demands sleep, but the quiet recognition that holding is no longer helping. As we listen together now, the night continues its work. Thoughts may arise and pass. Stories may blur at the edges. Nothing needs to be captured. Haruto's river flows. Annika's shrine stands open to the weather. Elias rests his hands at last. And we, too, may find that without effort, something loosens, not because we made it happen, but because it was ready. The night is wide enough to hold what we release. And if sleep comes, it comes gently, without needing permission. If it does not, that is also fine. We are not trying to arrive anywhere. We are simply no longer insisting on staying where we were. As the night deepens, there is often a moment when the edges of things begin to blur. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough that we stop insisting on clarity. This is not something we do. It happens when effort grows quiet. There was once a calligrapher named Yara who lived near a wide plain where the wind rarely stopped moving. Yara had studied for many years. Her teachers praised her discipline. Each character she painted was balanced, exact, faithful to tradition. Collectors admired her work. They said her lines were reliable. They said her hand never wavered. Yara herself was less satisfied. She could see, even in her best work, a tension she could not release. The characters were correct, but they felt held too tightly, as if afraid to step beyond the page. Each morning, she practiced before dawn. Each night, she reviewed what she had done, noticing what still felt forced. One winter evening, an old friend named Somchai visited her studio. He watched her work in silence, listening to the brush meet the paper. When she finished, he said, "You are still trying to protect the ink." Yara frowned. "The ink needs care," she replied. "If I loosen, the form will collapse." Samchai smiled. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps the ink knows how to fall." Before leaving, he asked if he could try one stroke. Yara hesitated, then handed him a brush. Samchai dipped it once and drew a single character, quickly, without adjustment. The line was uneven, the balance imperfect, but something in it breathed. Yara felt a tightening in her chest that surprised her. After Samchai left, she sat alone with the unfinished paper. For the first time in years, she did not practice. She watched the wind outside move the tall grasses, bending them all in different directions, never repeating the same pattern. The grasses did not worry about form. They responded. The next day, Yara's hand shook when she lifted the brush. She felt uncertain, exposed. Several pages were ruined. She let them be. Slowly, over weeks, her strokes began to change. They were less controlled, more alive. Some collectors stopped visiting. Others began to wait longer, sensing something they could not name. Yara learned that letting go did not improve her work in a predictable way. It simply made it honest. We often believe that what we hold tightly is what keeps us intact. Our roles, our habits, our ways of being seen. But holding is not the same as being whole. Sometimes, it is the very thing that keeps us from resting. As the night continues, you may notice that listening itself begins to loosen. Words may drift past without attaching. Stories may overlap. This is not a problem. It is a sign that something no longer needs to be held. There was a fisherman named Matteo who once tied his boat to the same post every night for decades. The knot was complex, secure, perfected through repetition. One evening, after a long day on the water, he found the post gone, pulled free by erosion. The tide was rising. For a moment, fear surged. Then he noticed another fisherman nearby, a younger man named Ishan, who simply guided his boat into a sheltered curve of the shore and let it rest there. "No, not," Matteo asked. Ishan shrugged. "The water is calm tonight." Matteo hesitated, then followed. Nothing was lost. Sometimes we tie knots long after the waters have changed. Letting go can feel risky because it removes what once gave us certainty. But certainty is not the same as safety. As the hours pass, the night offers many chances to loosen. Not all at once, not forever, just for now. You may notice thoughts arriving that once demanded attention, now drifting without argument. You may notice memories rising without the urge to resolve them. Or you may simply notice nothing in particular. All of this belongs. Letting go is not an achievement. It is the absence of strain. Yara's brush rests on the table. Mateo's boat rocks gently. The grasses continue to bend. And here, in this shared quiet, there is no need to keep watch. The night knows how to carry what we set down, and we are allowed, at last, to rest our hands. As the hours move on, the world becomes less interested in our opinions. Sounds soften. Edges lose their urgency. Even thoughts seem less certain about why they arrived. This is not because anything has been solved. It is because the night no longer asks us to hold the day together. There was once a woman named Leona who kept a small inn at a crossroads where travelers often arrived late and left early. Leona was attentive in a way people remembered. She noticed what guests preferred, which rooms they chose, which stories they repeated. She believed this was how care was given by remembering everything. She remembered who liked extra blankets, who disliked noise, who had once complained about the soup being too salty. Her mind was always busy, even after the lamps were dimmed. At night, when the inn was quiet, Leona would lie awake replaying conversations. She wondered if she had spoken too little or too much, if a guest would return, if she had missed something important. One winter, a traveler named Pavel arrived during a heavy snowfall. He stayed for several weeks while the roads remained closed. Pavel was unremarkable in most ways. Polite, quiet. He asked for nothing special. One evening, as Leona served him tea, she apologized for forgetting whether he took sugar. Pavel smiled. "It's all right," he said. "I forget myself most days." Leona laughed, then paused. "You forget yourself?" she asked. "Yes," Pavel said. "In the evening. Usually." She did not understand, but something in his tone stayed with her. Over the following days, she noticed that Pavel did not seem to carry the day into the night. He ate slowly. He sat by the window without looking for anything. When he slept, his rest seemed deep, unguarded. One night, unable to sleep, Leona joined him by the hearth. "How do you do it?" she asked suddenly. "Do what?" "Stop thinking," she said. Pavel considered this. "I don't stop," he said. "I just don't follow." Leona felt resistance rise. "If I don't follow," she said, "things fall apart." Pavel nodded. "They might," he said. or they might find another way to stay together. The snow continued for many days. During that time, Leona began to forget small things. She forgot who preferred which room. She forgot which story belonged to which traveler. Nothing collapsed. Guests still ate. Beds were still made. The inn remained standing. What changed was the space inside her evenings. For the first time in years, Leona slept without replaying the day. Not every night, but often enough to notice. Letting go does not always arrive as wisdom. Sometimes it arrives as forgetfulness. Not the loss of what matters, but the loosening of what no longer needs guarding. We often think attention must be held firmly, like a rope keeping us from drifting. But attention can also rest. As the night deepens further, you may find that listening itself becomes more distant. Words still arrive, but they do not ask to be understood. This is not a failure of attention. It is attention unburdened. There was a potter named Sora who once struggled to release finished bowls. She shaped them carefully. She fired them patiently. But when the time came to sell them, she hesitated. Each bowl carried hours of her life. Each imperfection felt personal. She lined them up on shelves and adjusted them endlessly, never quite ready. A merchant named Nalin visited her workshop one morning. He watched quietly, then selected a bowl without asking. "This one," he said. Sora reached out instinctively. "That one is flawed," she said. Nalin turned it in his hands. "Yes," he said. "That's why it will be used." He paid and left. Sora stood alone, staring at the empty space on the shelf. She felt an ache, then a strange lightness. The bowl was gone. So was her control over it. That night, she slept more deeply than she had in months. Letting go is often misunderstood as loss. But what loosens is not the thing itself. It is our claim over its outcome. We release not because it is noble, but because holding no longer serves. As these stories drift through the night, they are not meant to accumulate. They are meant to pass, like guests through Leona's inn. You may remember names or forget them. Either way, nothing is required. The night does not measure progress. It simply receives what we set down. And if, somewhere along the way, sleep takes over the listening, that is not a departure. It is a continuation by other means. We have been practicing letting go all along, without effort, simply by staying. And now, even staying becomes optional. The words will continue for a while, or perhaps they already fade. Both are welcome here. As the night stretches on, there is often a sense that time itself has loosened its grip. Hours no longer line up neatly. Moments drift into one another without asking permission. This is not confusion. It is a gentle untying. There was once an archivist named Renata who worked in a quiet stone building at the edge of a city. Her days were spent preserving records, letters, maps, lists of names written by hands long gone. Renata believed deeply in keeping things safe. If something was recorded, it would not be lost. If it was catalogued correctly, it would remain meaningful. She took pride in accuracy. Dates mattered. Order mattered. At night, however, she dreamed of misplaced documents and crumbling shelves. One afternoon, while sorting a collection damaged by dampness, she found several pages stuck together, the ink blurred beyond recognition. She felt a familiar tightening. Carefully, she tried to separate them. The paper tore. A colleague named Omar watched quietly from across the room. "Some things," he said gently, "cannot be saved the way they were." Renata felt a wave of frustration. "If we let this go," she said, "it's as if it never existed." Omar shook his head. "It existed," he said, "and now it exists like this." That evening, Renata stayed late. She looked at the damaged pages again. The words were gone, but the texture remained, the weight, the faint impression of lines where writing once lived. She placed the fragments carefully into a folder, labeled simply unrecoverable. For the first time, she did not feel like she had failed. She felt tired, and that tiredness felt honest. Letting go does not erase what was, it changes how we carry it. We often believe that if we loosen our hold, meaning disappears. But meaning is not stored in our grip. It moves, reshapes, finds quieter forms. As the night deepens, we may notice that memories surface differently, not demanding resolution, not asking to be fixed. They pass like Renata's blurred pages still present, no longer legible in the old way. There was a gardener named Thabo who once tended a long hedge bordering a narrow road. Each season, he trimmed it precisely, straight lines, even height. Travelers admired it. They said it showed discipline. One year, Thabo fell ill during the pruning season. The hedge grew uneven. Branches leaned outward. Flowers appeared in unexpected places. When Thabo recovered, he walked the length of the road slowly, noticing how the hedge now softened the path instead of controlling it. A neighbor named Lucian stopped beside him. "It's changed," Lucian said. Yes, Thabo replied. Will you fix it? Thabo considered this. I might, he said, or I might let it finish changing. He left part of the hedge untouched that year. Birds nested there. Shadows fell differently across the road. Travelers still passed. Some things do not need to be returned to order to remain alive. As listening continues, effort naturally thins. The mind, so used to managing, may find fewer tasks. This can feel unfamiliar, even unsettling. But nothing essential is being lost. There was a teacher named Mirella who spent many years explaining the same lessons. She refined her words carefully, each explanation polished. Students praised her clarity. Yet, privately, she felt a constant pressure to say things correctly. One evening, while teaching a small group, she lost her train of thought mid-sentence. Silence filled the room. She waited, searching for the missing words. They did not come. Instead, she laughed softly and said, I don't know how to finish that. The students waited. Then one of them spoke. I think I understand anyway, the student said. Something in Mirella loosened. From then on, she allowed pauses. She allowed sentences to end imperfectly. Her teaching did not become less effective. It became more spacious. Letting go does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means releasing the belief that we must hold everything together ourselves. As the night unfolds, you may find that even this reflection does not need to be followed closely. Words can float by without attachment. Understanding can rest without conclusion. There was a man named Koji who collected clocks. He repaired them meticulously, each mechanism restored to precision. His home ticked constantly. One night, a storm caused the power to fail. The clock stopped. At first, Koji felt unsettled. Then, slowly, the silence settled. Without ticking, the rooms felt wider. He slept deeply for the first time in years. In the morning, he repaired the clocks again. But he left one unwound. Not everything needs to keep time. As these stories continue to pass through the night, they ask nothing of us. They do not need to be remembered. They do not need to align. They are offered, then released. And in this release, rest becomes possible. The mind learns, gently, that it does not need to stay vigilant, that it is allowed to loosen its grip on meaning, on sequence, on outcome. The night carries what we no longer hold, and we are free, for now, to let that be enough. As the night moves toward its deepest hours, even the idea of moving forward begins to feel unnecessary. We are no longer traveling anywhere. We are simply remaining, without effort. This is often when the habit of holding shows itself most clearly. When nothing is required, we notice how often we have been bracing. There was once a glassblower named Ilona who worked in a workshop warmed constantly by fire. Her days were shaped by heat and timing. Too much force, and the glass collapsed. Too little, and it stiffened before it could take form. Ilona was skilled, respected for her consistency. She knew exactly when to turn the rod, when to pause, when to apply pressure. What she struggled with was finishing. As each piece neared completion, she hesitated. She adjusted the rim again. She reheated the glass unnecessarily. She searched for flaws that might not be there. More than one piece shattered because she would not let it cool. An older glassblower named Stefan watched her one evening as she worked late. "You're afraid of the cooling," he said quietly. Ilona did not answer. "When the glass cools," Stefan continued, "your hands no longer decide." Ilona felt something tighten. "If I stop," she said, "it might not be right." Stefan nodded. "And if you don't stop," he said, "it will never be finished." That night, Ilona left one piece alone sooner than she wanted. She turned off the flame and stepped back. The glass cooled slowly, silently. In the morning, the piece stood intact. Not perfect, but complete. Letting go is often this simple and this difficult. It is the moment we stop adjusting what no longer needs our hands. As listening continues through the night, there may be a sense that attention itself is cooling, not fading, settling. We are used to reheating thoughts, worries, plans, bringing them back into focus again and again. But the night does not require sharp edges. There was a courier named Benoit who spent his life delivering messages between towns. He memorized routes. He tracked distances. He prided himself on speed. Even when resting, his mind traveled ahead, planning the next delivery. One evening, after completing his route, Benoit sat by a quiet road with no destination left for the day. He felt restless. A farmer named Asha passed by and stopped. Waiting for something, she asked. Benoit shook his head. "I don't know how to stop," he said. Asha leaned against the fence. "When the cart is empty," she said, "it doesn't need to roll." Benoit stayed there longer than he intended. The road did not ask anything of him. For the first time, he noticed how the sky darkened without effort. We often move as if something is always being delivered, but many moments require nothing to arrive. As the night deepens, even the wish to let go may begin to soften. This is not a mistake. Letting go does not need encouragement. It happens naturally when the weight becomes unnecessary. There was a woman named Salma who kept a small notebook of regrets. She added to it quietly over the years, things said too sharply, chances missed, paths not taken. She told herself the notebook kept her honest. One evening, while reading through it by candlelight, she noticed that many entries no longer stirred anything. The memory remained. The charge had gone. She closed the notebook and did not open it again that night. Eventually, she stopped carrying it. The regrets did not disappear. They simply stopped asking to be held. As the hours pass, listening may feel more like floating than attending. Stories overlap. Names fade. This is not loss. It is release. There was a bridge keeper named Thomas who lived beside a narrow crossing over a slow river. He raised and lowered the gate each day, watching who passed. He believed his presence ensured safety. One night, exhausted, he fell asleep before lowering the gate. No accidents happened. The bridge remained. In the morning, Thomas laughed quietly. He began to trust the bridge. We often guard what does not require guarding. As we rest together in this long night, there is less and less to supervise. Thoughts may come, they may leave. Understanding may flicker, then dim. Nothing essential depends on our attention right now. There was a baker named Noor who woke early every morning to prepare dough. She measured carefully, timed precisely. One day, she overslept. The dough rested longer than intended. The bread that day was softer, more fragrant. She did not change her routine entirely, but she stopped waking with fear. Not everything needs constant correction. As the night continues, effort thins to the point where even thinning is no longer noticed. Listening becomes something that happens without a listener. The stories continue, or they dissolve. Both are acceptable. Letting go is not a decision made once. It is a series of small releases that happen when holding no longer feels necessary. The glass cools. The road rests. The bridge stands. And here, in this quiet stretch of night, we are allowed to do the same. No vigilance required, no outcome expected. Just this gentle absence of strain, carrying us wherever sleep may choose to arrive. As the night carries on, there is often a point when even the sense of night begins to soften. Darkness is no longer something we notice. It becomes the background in which everything else dissolves. This is a familiar place, even if we rarely recognize it. There was once a woman named Mireya who lived near the edge of a wide marsh. She was a keeper of lanterns. Each evening at dusk, she lit a series of lamps along a narrow path that crossed the wet ground guiding travelers safely from one side to the other. Mireia took her role seriously. She trimmed the wicks carefully. She polished the glass until it shone. She walked the path again and again, checking that each flame burned evenly. If a lantern flickered, she felt uneasy. If one dimmed, she hurried to correct it. For years, this vigilance brought her a sense of purpose. Then one season, fewer travelers came. The marsh shifted. New routes opened. The old path grew quiet. Still, Mireia lit the lanterns every evening. Some nights, no one passed at all. She told herself the light was still necessary, that someone might come late, that safety depended on her attention. One night, heavy fog rolled in from the marsh. The light from the lantern scattered uselessly, diffused into the mist. Mireia walked the path, her own way barely visible. At the far end, she sat on a stone, feeling the damp settle into her clothes. For the first time, she did not return to relight a flickering wick. The lantern continued to burn unevenly. Nothing happened. No cries for help, no travelers lost. The marsh breathed quietly around her. Over time, Mireia began lighting fewer lanterns. Not because she stopped caring, but because she noticed how the darkness itself guided the eye. The moon reflected off water. Stars traced faint lines above. Travelers who did come moved more slowly, attentively. Letting go, Mireia learned, did not mean abandoning light. It meant trusting that not everything needed to be illuminated. We often believe clarity must be maintained at all times, that if something dims, we have failed. But there is a kind of seeing that happens without brightness. As listening continues, you may notice that clarity is no longer something to protect. Words blur, meanings overlap, and still, nothing is wrong. There was a musician named Raphael who played a stringed instrument each evening in a small square. He practiced carefully, each note placed with intention. Listeners admired his precision. Yet Raphael felt tense during every performance. He listened closely for mistakes, correcting them as soon as they appeared. One evening, a string snapped mid-song. The sound cut sharply through the air. Raphael froze. Then, unsure what else to do, he continued playing with the remaining strings. The melody changed. It wandered, simplified. The listeners did not leave. Some leaned in closer. Afterward, a woman named Celeste approached him. "That was different," she said. Raphael nodded. "I couldn't hold it together," he replied. Celeste smiled. Maybe it didn't need to stay together. she said. Raphael replaced the string the next day, but he no longer listened for perfection. He listened for movement. Letting go often arrives disguised as interruption. Something breaks, something fails, and what remains continues differently. As the night deepens further, the mind may stop trying to assemble a complete picture. This can feel unfamiliar. We are so used to coherence, to narrative, to sense-making. But sense is not always built. Sometimes it is allowed. There was a map maker named Ivo who specialized in detailed charts. Every road, every contour. He believed that if a place could be fully mapped, it could be understood. One year, he was commissioned to chart a desert region known for shifting dunes. He worked carefully, returning again and again. Each time, the landscape had changed. Paths vanished. New ridges appeared. Frustrated, Ivo brought his incomplete maps to an elder named Fatima, who lived at the desert's edge. "I cannot finish this," he said. Fatima looked at the papers. "Then stop trying to," she said. Ivo frowned. A map must be complete. He insisted. Fatima shook her head. "A map can also be honest," she replied. Ivo returned home and labeled the chart simply "Unfixed Land." It became one of his most valued works, not because it told people where to go, but because it reminded them that some places cannot be held still. As listening stretches onward, the need to arrive at understanding may loosen. We may sense that nothing further is required. This is not boredom. It is completion without closure. There was a midwife named Hannah who assisted in countless births. She was attentive, responsive, skilled. She believed her constant presence ensured safety. One night, after many hours of labor, she felt herself grow very tired. Another midwife, Lior, stood beside her. "Rest," Lior said. "I can't," Hannah replied. "What if something happens?" Lior met her gaze. "Something is always happening," she said. "And still, life finds its way." Hannah stepped back briefly. The birth continued. In the quiet moments that followed, Hannah realized she had been holding more than she needed to. Letting go does not mean leaving. It means trusting that what is unfolding has its own intelligence. As the night settles into its deepest stillness, even the stories themselves may feel lighter. They no longer press forward. They simply pass through. There was a man named Victor who kept careful track of his days. He recorded what he had done, what he planned next. Lists filled his desk. One evening, he forgot to write anything. The next morning, he noticed nothing had been lost. Life continued. The record was incomplete. The day was whole. Eventually, Victor stopped recording every detail. He remembered what mattered and forgot the rest. As these hours move quietly along, there is less to say. Not because there is nothing left, but because what remains does not require words. Letting go, in the end, is not a lesson. It is a settling. The lantern dims, the melody simplifies, the map stays unfinished. And here, in this wide quiet, there is nothing left to manage. We do not need to hold the night. The night is already holding us. As the night reaches its quiet center, even the sense of listening can soften, not because attention disappears, but because it no longer feels owned. Sounds come and go. Words drift through like weather. Nothing needs to be done with them. There was once a watchmaker named Elio who lived in a narrow street where the days were marked by bells. He repaired watches for others, but he wore none himself. Still, time governed his movements. He woke at the same hour, ate at the same hour, closed his shop precisely at dusk. He believed that order was a form of respect. Each night, before sleeping, he reviewed the day in his mind, noting what had been done correctly and what might need adjustment tomorrow. One evening, while repairing an old pocket watch, a tiny spring slipped from his fingers and vanished. He searched the floor carefully. Minutes passed, then longer. He felt irritation rise, followed by worry. Without the spring, the watch could not be completed. Finally, he sat back, tired. The shop was quiet. The bells rang outside, marking the hour he usually prepared for sleep. But the watch lay unfinished. Elio did not rise. He sat, listening to the sound fade. That night, he slept without finishing his review. The next morning, sunlight revealed the spring resting openly near the table leg. He laughed softly, not because the problem had solved itself, but because he had seen how little his vigilance had helped. From then on, Elio allowed some days to remain incomplete. He still repaired watches. He simply stopped believing he had to keep time himself. Letting go often appears when control proves unnecessary. As the night deepens further, the mind may release its habit of checking the meaning, checking the sequence, checking whether something important has been missed. This is not neglect. It is trust, arriving quietly. There was a woman named Paloma who once carried water each day from a distant well. She balanced the vessel carefully on her head, adjusting her steps to keep it steady. For years, she walked with constant attention, never allowing herself to relax. One afternoon, tired from heat, she loosened her grip slightly. The water shifted, then settled. Nothing spilled. She walked the rest of the way more easily. From then on, she trusted the balance she had learned. Sometimes holding tight is only needed while learning. Once we know how to walk, we can release. As the hours pass, stories may no longer feel distinct. They blend. This is natural. The mind no longer sorts. There was a librarian named Josue who arranged books meticulously. He believed that knowledge depended on order. One night, a power outage left the library in darkness. Josue walked the aisles by memory. He realized he no longer needed to see the labels. He knew where things belonged. The next day, he allowed a small section to remain unsorted. No confusion followed. Understanding does not always require structure. Sometimes structure can rest. As listening continues, you may notice that even the desire to let go becomes faint. This, too, is part of the easing. There was a man named Oren who practiced balancing stones by the river. He stacked them carefully, adjusting each angle. One day, he built a tall stack, then stepped back. A breeze passed. The stones remained. Oren did not feel proud. He felt calm. He left the stack standing and walked away. He did not return to check if it fell. Letting go includes letting go of outcomes. As the night continues, effort thins until it is barely noticeable. Not because we force it to stop, but because it has nothing left to push against. There was a seamstress named Kaori who mended clothes for her village. She stitched carefully, making repairs invisible. One evening, her needle snapped. She used another, less familiar one. The stitches were uneven. The garment still held. She realized that perfection had not been necessary. Adequacy was enough, and enough was restful. As the quiet grows wider, the mind may wander without direction. This is not drifting away. It is arriving nowhere. There was a ferry operator named Luca who crossed the same river each day. He knew the current well. One morning, fog covered the water. He moved slowly, trusting the feel of the oars. He reached the opposite shore safely. Later, when asked if he had been afraid, he shook his head. The river was still there, he said. What we release is often the belief that we must see everything clearly to move forward. As the night carries us on, clarity becomes optional. Understanding can pause. Words may soften into sound. Meaning may dissolve into presence. There was a woman named Sophia who collected shells along the coast. She sorted them by size, color, shape. One day, she stopped sorting. She simply held one shell, feeling its weight. It was enough. As listening stretches on, Nothing new needs to be added. We are not accumulating wisdom. We are allowing space. There was a monk named Arun who once asked his teacher what remained after letting go. The teacher answered, "What was never held." This answer did not require explanation. As the hours approach their quiet end, the stories themselves may feel less important. They have done their work by passing through. What remains is not a lesson, but a condition, a gentleness, a lack of strain. The watch stops ticking. The water balances itself. The river carries the ferry. And here, in this long, unhurried night, we do not need to follow anything. Sleep may already be here, or it may still be approaching. Either way, nothing is asked of us. We have set down what we were holding, and the night, wide and patient, receives it without comment. As the night continues to unfold, there is often a gentle forgetting that takes place. Not the forgetting of loss, but the forgetting of effort. We stop keeping track of where we are in the story. We stop wondering how much time has passed. The night does not measure itself. There was once a ferryman named Casper who guided people across a broad lake before dawn. He knew the currents by feel, the way the oar resisted, the way the boat leaned. Casper did not speak much while crossing. Passengers often asked questions, nervous in the darkness. How far is it? Are we drifting? Do you know this way? Well, Casper would answer softly, then fall silent again. One morning, a passenger named Elsbeth asked, "How do you know where you are when you cannot see?" Casper paused before replying. "I don't," he said. "I know how to move." Elsbeth did not understand at first, but as the crossing continued, she felt the steadiness of his hands, the calm rhythm of the oars. They reached the opposite shore without incident. Casper never thought of the crossing as a problem to solve. It was a movement to participate in. Letting go is often the release of needing to know exactly where we are. As the night deepens, there is less interest in orientation, less concern about progress. We are carried. There was a woman named Brisa who cleaned the floors of a large hall each evening. She worked after everyone had left. Her task was repetitive, quiet. At first, she counted each section as she went, keeping track of how much remained. But over time, she stopped counting. The work finished itself. She noticed that when she stopped measuring, the task felt lighter. The floor did not need her attention to be complete. As listening continues, words may begin to feel less solid. They arrive, then fade. This is not emptiness. It is spaciousness. there was a man named Alaric who collected bells. Small ones, large ones. Each produced a slightly different tone. He rang them each evening, listening carefully, comparing sounds. One night, he dropped a bell. It cracked, producing a dull, uneven note. At first, Alaric felt disappointed. Then he noticed how the broken bell blended into the quiet more gently than the others. He kept it. Letting go does not always remove something. Sometimes it changes how it belongs. As the night moves further along, even comparison begins to soften. Better and worse lose their sharpness. There was a teacher named Nomi who once prepared carefully for every lesson. She wrote notes. She rehearsed examples. One evening, she arrived without her materials. She spoke simply, responding to the room rather than her plan. The lesson unfolded naturally. Afterward, she felt less tired than usual. Preparation had its place, but so did release. As listening stretches on, the sense of doing diminishes. We are not engaging with the stories. They are passing through us. There was a carpenter named Idris who shaped beams for houses. He measured twice, cut once. His precision was trusted. One afternoon, his measuring tool broke. He finished the beam by eye. It fit. He laughed quietly. Not everything needs verification. As the night deepens, the mind may no longer insist on certainty. This can feel like drifting. But drifting is not falling. There was a woman named Talia who once held tightly to routines. She woke, ate, worked, rested at exact times. When her routine was interrupted by illness, she felt lost. Then, slowly, she discovered moments of ease she had never scheduled. She rested when tired, moved when ready. Her days softened. Letting go can reveal rhythms we did not create. As the hours pass, even the sense of self may feel less defined. Not gone, just less outlined. There was a painter named Rowan who signed every piece boldly. His name was part of the work. One day, he forgot to sign a canvas. Someone bought it anyway. Rowan felt a strange relief. The painting had traveled without him. As listening continues, you may notice that attention drifts without consequence. Nothing collapses. There was a baker named Esme who checked the oven constantly. She feared burning the bread. One morning, distracted, she checked less often. The bread was fine. She realized her vigilance had been more about anxiety than necessity. As the night grows quieter, effort recedes naturally. There is nothing left to push against. There was a man named Pavlik who once carried heavy packs for travelers. He prided himself on strength. One day, he set the pack down earlier than usual. The traveler did not mind. Pavlik felt his shoulders release. Strength does not require constant proving. As the listening continues, we may notice the body settling without instruction. This is not something we cause. It is what happens when nothing interferes. There was a woman named Mirek who played with her child at dusk. She often checked the time, worried about routines. One evening, she lost track. The play ended naturally. The night arrived. Nothing was missed. As the night deepens further, words may begin to dissolve into tone. Meaning becomes less specific. This is not confusion. It is rest. There was a monk named Sajan who once told a visitor, "When you stop carrying questions, answers rest too." The visitor did not ask what he meant. It felt complete as it was. As these stories continue, they do not ask to be remembered. They are like footsteps on a soft path. Here, there is no destination, only the gentle absence of strain. Letting go is not something we perform. It is what happens when holding becomes unnecessary. The ferry moves. The floor dries. The bell rings softly, cracked and whole. And in this wide quiet, we do not need to follow anything further. The night continues, patient and unmarked. We are already where we need to be. As the night settles even more deeply, the sense of sequence loosens further. There may no longer be a clear before or after. Only this gentle unfolding, without direction. This is not disorientation. It is the easing of effort. There was once a stone carver named Petros who worked on the edge of a quiet quarry. He carved markers for paths and resting places, simple shapes, smooth surfaces. Petros believed his task was to make each stone unmistakable. He etched lines deeply so that wind and rain would not erase them. He wanted travelers to always know where they were. One afternoon, while working on a marker near a bend in the road, his chisel slipped. A line curved where it was meant to be straight. Petros paused, irritated. He considered starting again, but something in the curve felt gentle. He left it. Weeks later, a traveler named Aveline stopped beside that stone. "I like this one," she said. "It feels less certain." Petros smiled, surprised. "It was a mistake," he said. Aveline shook her head. "It's an invitation," she replied. Petros began carving fewer lines after that. Not because he cared less, but because he noticed how travelers slowed when the markers were simpler. They looked around more. Letting go does not always remove guidance. Sometimes it removes insistence. As the night continues, guidance itself may feel unnecessary. Listening does not require direction. There was a woman named Samira who kept careful track of her dreams. Each morning, she wrote them down, trying to preserve every detail. She believed the dreams held meaning that might be lost if not captured. One night, she slept too deeply to remember anything. She woke with a sense of calm she could not explain. The page remained blank. Over time, she stopped writing. The dreams continued. Meaning did not disappear. As the hours pass, even memory loosens its grip. We do not need to remember where we have been in this night. We are still here. There was a shepherd named Ion who watched his flock in the hills. He counted them often, fearing loss. One evening, tired, he stopped counting. The flock grazed quietly. Nothing wandered away. Ion rested against a rock and watched the sky darken. Control had not been keeping the sheep together. Presence had. As listening continues, presence itself becomes lighter. Not something we do. Something that remains when effort fades. There was a bookbinder named Celia who repaired old volumes. She worked carefully, aligning pages, restoring spines. Each book felt like a responsibility. One day, she received a volume too damaged to repair. The pages crumbled at her touch. She closed the cover gently and placed it aside. She did not feel regret. The book had reached its rest. Caring does not always mean restoring. Sometimes it means allowing completion. As the night deepens, the idea of improvement may fade. Nothing needs to be better. There was a brewer named Tommaso who adjusted his recipes constantly. A little more heat, a little less time. He chased an ideal flavor. One season, distracted, he forgot to adjust anything. The brew was enjoyed anyway. He laughed and stopped chasing. Letting go often reveals that enough was already present. As the hours move quietly onward, listening may feel like drifting on water. No destination, no effort to steer. There was a boat painter named Lyra who decorated halls with elaborate designs. She planned each pattern carefully. One day, she ran out of paint and finished a boat with bare wood exposed. The owner loved it. Lyra realized she had been adding more than necessary. She began leaving space. Space did not diminish beauty. It allowed it to breathe. As the night continues, the desire to add meaning may soften. Meaning does not need encouragement. There was a philosopher named André who spent years writing arguments. He refined them endlessly. One evening, he stopped mid-sentence and closed the book. He felt relief. The argument did not need finishing to be complete. As listening stretches on, thoughts may arise less frequently. When they do, they pass without pulling us along. There was a farmer named Luce who checked the weather obsessively. She worried about rain, about sun. One year, she stopped checking. She worked with what arrived. The crops grew. The sky did not require her vigilance. As the night grows quieter still, even the sense of letting go becomes unnecessary. Nothing is being held now. There was a glass collector named Eric who displayed his pieces carefully. He dusted them daily. One evening, a shelf broke. Some glass shattered. Eric felt sadness, then acceptance. The room felt larger afterward. He rearranged what remained and enjoyed the space. Loss does not always leave emptiness. Sometimes it leaves room. As the listening continues, the mind may stop forming expectations. This is not emptiness. It is openness. There was a teacher named Noura who once said to her students, "If you are tired of understanding, rest." They did not ask what she meant. They felt it. As the night continues its slow movement, stories no longer need to connect. They appear. They dissolve. This is how the mind rests when it no longer needs coherence. There was a watchful guard named Emile who stood by a gate each night. He believed his attention kept danger away. One night he dozed. Nothing happened. He learned that the gate did not depend on his tension. As the hours stretch on, even the sense of self may feel softer. Not gone, just unburdened. There was a dancer named Rena who practiced daily. She counted steps precisely. One evening, she danced without counting. The movement felt free. She laughed quietly and let the dance end when it wished. As listening continues, words may blur into sound, sound into silence. This is not the end. It is the easing into rest. There was a traveler named Mikkel who once asked an elder how to know when he had arrived. The elder replied, "When you stop looking." Mikkel did not understand at first. Later, he stopped looking. Nothing needed to be found. As the night carries us gently onward, nothing more is required. We do not need to remember these stories. They are already passing. What remains is the absence of strain. The stone rests. The page stays blank. The flock grazes. And here, in this long, unbroken night, we are not doing anything at all. We are simply no longer holding. And that is enough. As the night continues, without asking anything of us, there can be a sense of floating inside time rather than moving through it. Nothing pushes forward. Nothing pulls back. This is not the loss of direction. It is the quiet absence of pressure. There was once a bell ringer named Dorje who lived beside a mountain temple. Each morning and evening, he rang the bell to mark the hours of practice and rest. The bell was heavy, its rope rough against his palms. Dorje rang it with care. Not too hard, not too softly. He believed the sound needed to be precise, clear enough to reach the far hillside, gentle enough not to startle. For many years, he worried about this balance. One winter morning, his hands numb from cold, the bell rang unevenly. The sound wavered. It echoed strangely against the stone. Dorje felt a familiar tightening. But as the sound traveled down the mountain, he noticed something unexpected. The uneven tone lingered longer. It softened as it faded. Later that day, a visitor named Kaido approached him. "I liked the bell this morning," Kaido said. "It sounded more human." Dorje laughed quietly. He had not meant to change anything. From then on, he rang the bell without adjusting for perfection. The mountain still heard it. Letting go is sometimes nothing more than allowing our hands to be what they are. As the night deepens, the sense of responsibility may loosen. We are not required to keep things running. There was a woman named Irina who managed a small post office in a remote town. She sorted letters meticulously, tracked deliveries carefully. She believed her attention kept the town connected. One night, heavy snow delayed all transport. No letters arrived, no packages left. The post office stood still. Irina expected restlessness. Instead, she felt relief. The town did not dissolve. People spoke to each other directly. They waited. When deliveries resumed, Irina worked again. But she no longer felt solely responsible for connection. Letting go does not end relationships. It reveals that they do not depend entirely on us. As listening continues, the need to stay alert may fade. The night does not require guardians. There was a lighthouse keeper named Safina who watched the sea every night. She trimmed the lamp, checked the mechanisms. She believed vigilance kept sailors safe. One foggy evening, the light failed briefly. Safina hurried to fix it. When she returned to the window, she saw a ship pass safely, guided by sound and memory. The sea had other ways. Safina still tended the light. She simply slept more deeply afterward. As the night stretches on, effort thins without instruction. We do not need to relax. Relaxation arrives when holding ends. There was a tailor named Marius who fitted garments precisely. He adjusted hems endlessly, seeking exactness. One client, a woman named Lenka, smiled gently and said, "It's fine as it is." Marius hesitated, then let it be. The garment was worn happily. Marius felt a weight lift. Perfection had been his burden, not hers. As listening continues, the wish to correct may soften. Nothing needs fixing right now. There was a clock tower keeper named Yusef who wound the mechanism each night. He listened for irregularities. One evening, tired, he wound it slightly less. The clock still kept time. Yusef stopped checking so often. The tower stood. As the night deepens, the mind may stop rehearsing tomorrow. Plans loosen. There was a seam boat captain named Helena who prepared routes in advance. Charts spread across the table each night. One evening, she closed the charts early. The next day, she navigated by the sky. The sea welcomed her. Planning had been useful, but so was trust. As listening stretches onward, words may feel less like carriers of meaning and more like gentle sounds. This is not confusion. It is ease. There was a baker named Orfeo who woke early to knead dough. He watched the clock carefully. One morning, he overslept. The dough rose longer. The bread was praised. Orfeo stopped fearing lateness. Time did not punish him. As the night grows quieter still, we may notice that even the idea of night is fading. There is only this. There was a teacher named Salvatore who once said, "When nothing is demanded, learning rests." His students did not write this down. They felt it. As listening continues, even curiosity may soften. We do not need to know what comes next. There was a traveler named Nico who paused at a crossroads at dusk. He stood there for a long time. Eventually, he sat. The road did not insist. As the hours pass, attention may drift without anchor. This is not losing focus. It is letting go of the need for one. There was a weaver named Amara who worked intricate patterns. One day, she left a section plain. The cloth felt calmer. She smiled and continued. As the night continues, even the sense of doing nothing becomes unnecessary. There is no stance to maintain. There was a gardener named Benoit who stopped pruning for a season. The garden changed. It did not fail. Life rearranged itself. As listening carries on, stories feel lighter, like leaves on water. They touch, then separate. No accumulation. There was a musician named Zoran who practiced scales endlessly. One night, he played only what came. The sound was simple. He slept well. As the night moves on, there is less to say. Not because silence is required, but because nothing needs explanation. There was a child named Eleni who once asked why the moon followed her. No one answered. The moon kept moving. The question faded. As listening continues, the need to understand fades too. there is no problem to solve. There was an innkeeper named Radha who once worried about empty rooms. One night, all rooms were empty. She enjoyed the quiet. The inn remained. As the night stretches without measure, we rest inside it without effort. No holding, no guiding, no correcting. There is only this gentle continuation. The bell rings, the snow falls, the bread rises. And here, in this unmarked stretch of time, nothing more is required. We are not arriving. We are not leaving. We are simply no longer holding anything at all. As the night continues, it no longer feels as though we are listening to something that progresses. It feels more like resting inside something that gently repeats itself. The mind stops asking where this is going. It stops checking how long it has been. This is not because answers were found. It is because the questions have grown quiet. There was once a river guide named Tomasz who led small boats through a wide delta. The channels shifted often. Sandbanks appeared and disappeared. New guides studied maps constantly, worried about choosing the wrong path. Tomasz carried no maps. He had guided the river for decades. When asked how he knew where to steer, he would say, "I don't decide early." He waited until the boat was close enough to feel the pull of the water. Only then did he turn. One afternoon, a younger guide named Renzo questioned him. "What if you wait too long?" Renzo asked. Tomasz smiled. "Then the river decides," he said. Renzo did not understand at first. But after many crossings, he noticed that the river rarely punished patience. It responded to attention, not control. Letting go is often the release of deciding too early. As the night deepens, decisions feel unnecessary. Nothing needs to be chosen. There was a woman named Eliska who collected dried herbs and stored them carefully. She labeled each jar precisely. She worried about spoilage. One evening, she forgot to seal a jar. By morning, the herbs were unchanged. She realized how much of her worry had been precaution layered on precaution. Care remained. Anxiety loosened. As listening continues, thoughts may still appear, but they no longer demand engagement. They pass like distant sounds. There was a stonemason named Pavel who once believed strength was constant effort. He pushed himself each day. One morning, exhausted, he worked more slowly. The stone did not resist him. He discovered that force had been masking sensitivity. Letting go can reveal a quieter competence. As the hours stretch onward, even competence becomes irrelevant. Nothing needs to be done well. There was a woman named Marisol who braided rope for fishing nets. Her hands moved without thought. One evening, she stopped mid-braid and watched her fingers. They continued for a moment, then rested. The rope did not unravel. As listening deepens, the sense of agency softens. Things happen without us directing them. There was a teacher named Benoit who once prepared extensively for every lecture. One day, he arrived with no notes. He spoke simply. Students listened more closely. The absence of structure created space. As the night continues, space itself becomes the main presence. Words rest inside it. Silence rests inside it too. There was a woman named Alina who arranged flowers for ceremonies. She balanced color and shape carefully. One evening, tired, she placed the flowers loosely. The arrangement felt alive. She did not adjust it. Letting go can feel like allowing a symmetry. As listening stretches on, memory loosens. Earlier stories may blur together. This is not forgetting. It is the mind releasing its grip on sequence. There was a storyteller named Hamid who knew many tales. He once forgot the ending of a familiar story. He laughed and stopped. The listeners did not mind. The pause felt complete. As the night deepens further, even completion becomes unnecessary. Things do not need to resolve. There was a woman named Freya who once closed every door carefully. She checked locks twice. One night, she fell asleep before checking. Nothing happened. She began sleeping more easily. As listening continues, vigilance fades. There is nothing to guard against. There was a bridge painter named Nestor who repainted the same bridge each year. One season, he skipped a section. The bridge remained. Rust did not rush in. He realized how much of his work had been reassurance. As the hours pass, reassurance itself becomes unnecessary. The night is stable without it. There was a farmer named Kaleo who watched the sky constantly. He worried about rain. One evening, he stopped watching. Rain came anyway. The crops grew. As listening continues, the sense of participation becomes gentle. We are not doing this. It is happening. There was a woman named Yana who once counted her steps while walking. She believed it kept her focused. One evening, she stopped counting. The walk felt longer, softer. She arrived without effort. As the night stretches on, even arriving feels irrelevant. We are already here. There was a potter named Lucio who smoothed each bowl repeatedly. One day, he stopped sooner. The bowl held water. It was enough. As listening deepens, enough becomes a resting place. There is no need to improve this moment. There was a man named Arjun who planned conversations in advance. One night, he spoke without planning. The conversation flowed. He felt lighter afterward. Letting go often releases us from rehearsal. As the hours pass, the mind may drift freely. No anchor needed. There was a bird keeper named Elise who monitored her birds closely. One evening, she forgot to check. The birds slept. She slept too. As the night continues, the sense of time fades further. Moments no longer stack. There was a watchful elder named Miro who once said, "When you stop watching the clock, the night opens." No one asked him to explain. As listening carries on, nothing is being learned. Something is being unlearned. There was a woman named Sabella who once held her breath while concentrating. One night, she noticed and laughed. She let it go. Breathing continued. As the night deepens, even noticing fades. Awareness becomes background. There was a roadkeeper named Thomasin who repaired signs. One sign fell. Travelers still found their way. As listening continues, effort dissolves. There is no stance to maintain. There was a candle maker named Jiro who watched flames carefully. One evening, he let them burn unevenly. The room felt warmer. As the night moves on, warmth replaces clarity. There is no need to see sharply. There was a woman named Lotta who once kept track of every mistake. One night, she grew tired of counting. The mistakes lost their shape. She rested. As listening continues, rest deepens without instruction. We are not settling in. We are settling out of holding. There was a monk named Pima who once said, "When nothing is held, nothing falls." The words were not explained. They did not need to be. As the night carries us quietly onward, stories no longer stand apart. They merge into a gentle hum. We do not need to remember them. We do not need to understand them. They have already passed through. What remains is not a message. It is a condition, a soft absence of strain. The river moves. The hands rest. The night continues. And here, without effort, without direction, without holding, there is nothing more to do. As the night continues to hold us, there is a sense that even holding is no longer happening. The words move on their own. The listening rests where it is. Nothing leans forward. Nothing pulls away. There was once a papermaker named Anselmo who worked beside a slow stream. Each morning, he soaked pulp, lifted frames, pressed sheets carefully. He believed that patience was the most important part of his craft. If he hurried, the paper tore. If he forced the drying, it warped. Still, he worried. He worried about weather, about timing, about whether the sheets would dry evenly. One afternoon, clouds gathered unexpectedly. Rain began before he could move the drying racks inside. Anselmo rushed, slipping in the mud, trying to save each sheet. Some were soaked through. Exhausted, he stopped. The rain fell steadily. Later, when the sun returned, he found that the soaked sheets had dried with a different texture. Softer, more absorbent. Artists began requesting this paper specifically. Anselmo learned that what he had been trying to protect was only one version of good. Letting go revealed another. As the night deepens, the idea of right and wrong softens. There is only what arrives. There was a woman named Mirette who tuned string instruments for a living. She listened closely, adjusting pegs by fractions. She believed that harmony required constant correction. One evening, her hearing felt dull after a long day. She tuned an instrument slightly off without realizing. The musician who played it later smiled. "It sounds warmer," he said. Mirette rested her hands and listened differently after that. Perfection had been one tone among many. As listening continues, we may notice that we are no longer checking for resonance. We are simply letting sound be sound. There was a road builder named Kunal who smoothed stones along a mountain path. He checked each stone, making sure it sat flush. Travelers praised the smoothness. One year, a section of the path was left unfinished due to a landslide. Stones shifted. Travelers slowed there. They noticed the view. Kunal did not rush to repair it. Sometimes unevenness invites attention. As the night stretches on, attention no longer needs guidance. It finds its own pace. There was a woman named Odette who arranged chairs in a small hall before gatherings. She aligned them precisely. One evening, she arrived late and left them as they were. People sat comfortably. Conversations flowed. Odette felt unnecessary for the first time. It was relieving. As listening deepens, the sense of necessity fades. We are not required. There was a clock repairer named Hassan who adjusted pendulums daily. He believed constant fine-tuning kept them accurate. One night, he forgot to adjust one. The clock kept time. Hassan slept more soundly. As the night continues, the mind may stop scanning for errors. Errors dissolve when nothing is being judged. There was a woman named Sina who practiced handwriting each night. She aimed for uniformity. One evening, her pen ran out of ink mid-letter. She finished the word with a different pen. The word remained readable. She stopped practicing after that. Communication had never depended on uniform strokes. As listening continues, the need to refine dissolves. There is nothing left to improve. There was a fisherman named Oleg who checked his nets repeatedly at night. He feared loss. One night, exhausted, he slept through. The nets held. Oleg woke with a quiet trust. As the hours pass, trust does not need justification. It simply rests. There was a potter named Mirek who glazed his bowls carefully. He followed strict ratios. One batch came out differently due to a miscalculation. The glaze pooled unexpectedly. Buyers loved it. Mirek laughed and stopped measuring so precisely. Letting go often reveals that life has its own sense of balance. As listening stretches on, balance no longer needs attention. It holds itself. There was a woman named Kayla who monitored her plants closely. She measured water, tracked light. One week, she traveled and left them unattended. They grew. Some grew better. She returned lighter. As the night continues, the sense of oversight fades. We do not need to oversee this moment. There was a musician named Davor who practiced scales every night. One evening, his instrument stayed in its case. He listened to the room instead. The silence felt complete. As listening deepens, silence and sound are no longer separate. They pass together. There was a courier named Lucette who delivered messages between towns. She worried about timing. One night, delayed by weather, she arrived late. The message was still welcome. She realized urgency had lived mostly in her body. As the night moves on, urgency loosens its hold. Nothing is late. There was a sculptor named Bahir who carved faces from wood. He refined expressions carefully. One carving split unexpectedly. He left it. The face felt honest. Bahir carved fewer expressions after that. As listening continues, honesty replaces effort. Nothing needs decoration. There was a baker named Ilsa who kneaded dough firmly. She believed strength made structure. One morning, tired, she kneaded gently. The bread was light. She rested more often after that. As the night deepens, gentleness replaces force. There is no resistance to overcome. There was a librarian named Ottavio who tracked book returns meticulously. One book stayed overdue. He waited. It returned eventually. The library survived. Ottavio stopped worrying. As listening stretches on, systems no longer require supervision. They breathe on their own. There was a painter named Noah who layered colors carefully. One evening, she left a canvas unfinished. She never returned to it. Someone bought it. Noah felt a sense of relief she could not explain. As the night continues, unfinished does not feel incomplete. It feels open. There was a watchful guard named Sylvan who patrolled a quiet courtyard. He walked the same path each hour. One night, he sat instead. Nothing happened. He sat again the next night. As listening deepens, sitting replaces pacing. There is nowhere to go. There was a seamstress named Irina who stitched seams invisibly. One evening, her stitches showed. The garment held. She smiled. As the night moves on, visibility no longer matters. Function rests without disguise. There was a ferry clerk named Jovan who checked tickets carefully. One evening, he waved people through without checking. The ferry crossed safely. He felt lighter. As listening continues, permission replaces control. Nothing needs to be enforced. There was a candle lighter named Reiko who lit dozens of candles each dusk. One candle remained unlit one evening. The room was still bright enough. She stopped counting candles. As the night deepens, enough becomes obvious. There was a traveler named Mael who once asked how long the road was. The guide replied, "Long enough." Mael stopped asking. As listening continues, questions lose their urgency. They dissolve without answers. There was a glass washer named Petra who polished glasses until they shone. One evening, she left a few dull. Guests drank happily. Petra rested her arms. As the night continues, effort dissolves into sufficiency. There is no need to shine. There was a teacher named Ilias who planned every word. One night, he spoke simply. The room felt calm. He did not plan again for a while. As listening stretches on, simplicity rests easily. There is nothing to add. There was a stone carrier named Radu who lifted heavy loads daily. One evening, he set one stone down early. The path remained. His back thanked him. As the night deepens, the body releases without instruction. It knows when to stop. There was a woman named Alara who kept track of promises. One promise was forgotten. Nothing bad followed. She forgot more often after that. As listening continues, memory loosens its grip. There is nothing to keep. There was a map reader named Vito who followed routes exactly. One day, he wandered off path. He arrived somewhere unexpected and pleasant. He stopped clinging to roots. As the night moves on, wandering feels safe. There is no wrong direction. There was a bell maker named Sunil who tested tones carefully. One bell rang unevenly. He kept it. It was soothing. As listening deepens, unevenness becomes comforting. There is no standard to meet. There was a night watcher named Callum who stayed awake to ensure nothing went wrong. One night, he slept. Nothing did. He slept again. As the night continues, vigilance dissolves into trust. There is nothing to guard. There was a woman named Nivs who folded clothes neatly. One evening, She left them unfolded. The day still came. She smiled. As listening stretches on, order relaxes. There is no chaos. There was a scribe named Akram who copied texts carefully. One line smudged. He left it. The meaning remained. As the night deepens, meaning no longer depends on clarity. There was a river keeper named Yelena who monitored water levels. One night she stopped checking. The river flowed. As listening continues, flow requires no witness. There was a gardener named Tomashewa who trimmed edges precisely. One season, she let them grow. The garden softened. She rested in it. As the night carries on, softness replaces edge. There is no boundary to hold. There was a storyteller named Una who once said, "When the story lets go of you, sleep arrives." No one asked her to explain. As listening continues now, the words may already be loosening their hold. They drift. They fade. They leave no trace to follow. There is nothing left to do. Nothing left to remember. Only this quiet continuation, already complete, already resting. As the night keeps moving without effort, there is less and less sense of a listener doing anything at all. Sound happens. Silence happens. Thoughts may appear, then quietly step aside. Nothing is being managed. There was once a tide watcher named Amen who lived on a rocky coast. Each day, he noted the waters rise and fall, marking times carefully in a worn ledger. He believed the notes mattered. That accuracy honored the sea. At night, he lay awake thinking of storms, of miscalculations, of what might be missed. One evening, after a long day, he forgot to write anything down. He slept deeply. The next morning, the tide returned as it always had. Amen still watched the water, but he stopped recording every change. The sea did not require documentation. Letting go sometimes begins when record-keeping grows heavy. As the night continues, the need to witness every moment loosens. There was a woman named Isabel who sorted seeds for planting. She separated them by size, shape, and color, believing order improved growth. One season, distracted, she mixed several varieties together. The field grew unevenly, but abundantly. Some plants sheltered others from wind. Isabel smiled and stopped sorting so carefully. Life had found its own arrangement. As listening deepens, arrangement becomes less important. Things fall where they fall. There was a man named Corin who practiced archery each dawn. He focused intensely, adjusting stance and aim. One morning, half asleep, he released the arrow without preparation. It struck close to the center. Corin laughed quietly. His body knew what his mind had been insisting on controlling. As the night stretches on, the body remembers how to rest. No instruction needed. There was a woman named Danica who watched her reflection often. She adjusted hair, clothing, posture. She believed presentation mattered. One night, alone, she forgot to look. She felt lighter, as if something unnecessary had been set down. From then on, she checked less. Nothing important changed. As listening continues, self-monitoring fades. There is no audience here. There was a miller named Tobin who adjusted the water wheel constantly. He listened for irregular sounds, fearing inefficiency. One night, he slept through the wheels turning. In the morning, the mill had ground enough grain. Tobin trusted the wheel more after that. As the night deepens, trust replaces oversight. There was a woman named Morella who kept careful count of her words. She measured tone and timing. One evening, she spoke without filtering. The conversation felt honest. She rested afterward. Letting go often releases energy we did not know we were spending. As listening stretches on, energy settles on its own. There was a shepherd named Pavelu who slept lightly, listening for wolves. Years passed without incident. One night, exhausted, he slept deeply. The flock was safe. He slept deeply again the next night. Vigilance had been a habit, not a requirement. As the night continues, habits loosen. There was a glass cleaner named Faye who polished windows daily. She believed clarity mattered. One day, rain streaked the glass before she finished. People inside still saw the sky. Faye stopped polishing so often. As listening deepens, clarity becomes optional. Seeing does not depend on perfection. There was a wood turner named Silas who shaped bowls on a lathe. He watched closely, correcting each wobble. One evening, he stepped back sooner. The bowl held its form. He realized he had been interrupting balance. As the night moves on, balance is trusted. There was a woman named Karima who checked doors repeatedly. She feared intrusion. One night, she forgot to check. She slept peacefully. In the morning, everything was as it had been. She checked once after that, not 3 times. As listening continues, fear loses its job. There was a bell tender named Otto who listened for cracks. One bell rang slightly off. He considered fixing it. Instead, he left it. The sound felt gentle. Otto rested. As the night deepens, gentleness replaces correction. There was a translator named Leon who searched endlessly for perfect words. One day, she chose simpler ones. The meaning arrived more clearly. She stopped overworking language. As listening stretches on, words soften. There was a woman named Branka who counted steps while climbing a hill. She believed it kept her steady. One evening, she climbed without counting. She reached the top without noticing when. She enjoyed the view. As the night continues, counting fades. There is nowhere to measure. There was a candle keeper named Just who lit each wick carefully. One wick bent. The candle still burned. Just left it. As listening deepens, small imperfections lose importance. There was a map archivist named Renzo who preserved old routes. He worried about losing history. One map tore slightly. He repaired it gently, then stopped worrying. History had already passed. As the night moves on, preservation gives way to acceptance. There was a musician named Ione who listened closely for wrong notes. One evening, she stopped listening that way. The music felt fuller. She slept well. As listening continues, listening itself changes. It becomes wide. There was a fisherman named Marco who watched the horizon constantly. He scanned for signs. One night, he watched the stars instead. The fish came anyway. As the night deepens, scanning stops. There is nothing to anticipate. There was a gardener named Celine who trimmed every leaf. One season, she trimmed less. The plants grew stronger. She rested more often. As listening stretches on, effort fades into adequacy. There was a baker named Thomasina who worried about rising times. One night, she slept through an alarm. The bread rose. She laughed and baked it. As the night continues, alarms lose urgency. There was a calligrapher named Nori who practiced strokes endlessly. One evening, she stopped mid-page. The unfinished character felt complete. She closed the book. As listening deepens, unfinished no longer feels wrong. There was a porter named Ivan who carried loads beyond comfort. One night, he set one down. The road remained passable. His shoulders relaxed. As the night moves on, strength rests. There was a teacher named Safia who checked students' understanding constantly. One class, she stopped checking. They learned anyway. She trusted more after that. As listening continues, trust replaces checking. There was a lighthouse painter named Hugo who repainted each year. One year, he skipped a section. The light still shone. He smiled. As the night deepens, function stands without polish. There was a seamstress named Marta who hid all seams. One evening, seams showed. The dress was worn proudly. Marta rested. As listening stretches on, hiding becomes unnecessary. There was a night clerk named Oscar who counted receipts twice. One night he counted once. The numbers matched. He slept sooner. As the night continues, repetition falls away. There was a weatherman named Eliash who worried about predictions. One day, he simply described what he saw. People appreciated it. He worried less. As listening deepens, description replaces control. There was a poet named Rhea who revised endlessly. One poem she did not revise. It was read often. She stopped revising so much. As the night moves on, revision ceases. There was a watchman named Benno who walked the perimeter hourly. One night, he sat instead. Nothing changed. He sat again the next night. As listening continues, sitting becomes enough. There was a washerwoman named Lenore who wrung cloth tightly. One evening, tired, she wrung gently. The cloth dried anyway. Her hands felt better. As the night deepens, gentleness prevails. There was a sculptor named Jarek who sanded surfaces smooth. One piece stayed rough. Viewers touched it longer. He left more roughness after that. As listening stretches on, texture replaces polish. There was a boat tie-off keeper named Nuala who checked knots constantly. One knot loosened slightly. The boat stayed. She trusted knots more after that. As the night continues, trust settles in the body. There was a traveler named Soren who carried many tools just in case. One night, he left some behind. He did not need them. His pack felt lighter. As listening deepens, preparedness relaxes. There was a woman named Teresa who replayed conversations nightly. One evening, she fell asleep mid-replay. Nothing bad happened. She slept sooner thereafter. As the night moves on, replay dissolves. There was a bookkeeper named Raoul who balanced accounts obsessively. One column stayed unchecked. The business survived. Raoul worried less. As listening continues, survival does not depend on perfection. There was a fire tender named Yuki who watched embers carefully. One ember faded unnoticed. The fire remained warm. She rested. As the night deepens, warmth replaces vigilance. There was a storyteller named Callista who once said softly, "When the mind loosens its grip, the night does the rest." No one asked her how. They felt it. And now, as this long night continues, there is nothing left to loosen, nothing left to set down. The stories no longer arrive as stories. They arrive as quiet space, and in that space, without effort, without direction, sleep may already be resting, or wakefulness may still be here. Both are welcome. Nothing is required. Nothing is missing. The night continues, wide and untroubled, carrying everything that has been gently released. As the night carries on, there is less distinction between staying awake and drifting. Both feel similar now. Both require nothing. The listening no longer feels active. It feels like something happening on its own. There was once a woman named Isolde who kept a small observatory on a hill. Each night, she adjusted lenses and recorded movements of distant stars. She believed that watching carefully honored the sky. If she missed something, she felt uneasy, as though a duty had gone unfinished. One evening, clouds covered the stars completely. Isolde waited. Hours passed. She adjusted nothing. Finally, tired, she rested her head on the desk and slept. In the morning, the sky was unchanged. The stars had not depended on her watching. She still returned to the observatory on clear nights. But she stopped feeling responsible for the heavens. Letting go sometimes begins when we realize that what we care for continues without our supervision. As the night deepens, supervision loosens. There was a rope maker named Benedetta who twisted fibers carefully each day. She believed even tension was essential. One afternoon, distracted, she twisted unevenly. The rope held just as well. She noticed how much strain had been in her wrists. From then on, she worked more gently. The rope did not weaken. As listening continues, tension drains away without instruction. There was a man named Florian who watched over a narrow mountain pass. He believed his watchfulness kept travelers safe. One winter night, exhausted, he slept through his shift. No one was harmed. The pass remained. Florian slept more soundly after that. As the night moves on, watchfulness fades. There is nothing to guard. There was a woman named Sabine who folded letters neatly before sending them. She believed presentation mattered. One day, in a hurry, she sent one unfolded. The message was received kindly. Sabine smiled and stopped worrying. As listening deepens, worry finds no place to rest. There was a cooper named André who shaped barrels carefully. He checked each seam repeatedly. One barrel slipped through unchecked. It held. He laughed and trusted his hands more. As the night stretches on, trust replaces repetition. There was a woman named Hoshi who kept careful track of her steps while walking. She counted to maintain rhythm. One evening, she forgot to count. Her steps continued. She felt lighter. As listening continues, rhythm takes care of itself. There was a painter named Ellen who layered colors patiently. She planned each layer. One canvas was painted quickly, without planning. It was the one people remembered. Ellen stopped planning so much. As the night deepens, Spontaneity no longer feels risky. There was a baker named Roque who checked ovens constantly. One night, he rested instead. The bread baked evenly. He rested more often afterward. As listening continues, rest becomes trusted. There was a locksmith named Petra who tested locks repeatedly. She believed certainty required repetition. One evening, she locked a door once and left. The door stayed locked. She slept well. As the night moves on, certainty loosens. There was a midwife named Olya who watched each birth carefully. She believed attention ensured safety. One night, she stepped out briefly. Life continued. Olya trusted the process more afterward. As listening deepens, trust replaces control. There was a bookmender named Kiro who repaired torn pages meticulously. One page was too fragile. He left it. The book remained readable. He accepted limits. As the night stretches on, limits feel gentle. There was a woman named Maureen who set alarms for everything. One alarm failed. The day unfolded anyway. She removed several alarms after that. As listening continues, reminders fade. There was a carpenter named Leaf who measured obsessively. One cut was made by eye. It fit. He measured less often. As the night deepens, skill rests without proof. There was a gardener named Priya who pulled every weed. One season, she pulled fewer. The garden balanced itself. She rested in it. As listening stretches on, balance emerges naturally. There was a musician named Harlan who practiced until exhausted. One evening, he stopped early. The music stayed with him. He slept deeply. As the night moves on, effort dissolves into sufficiency. There was a seam cutter named Nadine who followed patterns strictly. One garment was cut freely. It was comfortable. She cut more freely after that. As listening deepens, freedom no longer alarms. There was a ferry signalman named Thomas who watched lights carefully. One light went dim. Boats still crossed. He trusted the water more. As the night continues, trust spreads. There was a storyteller named Anouk who revised stories endlessly. One night, she told one only once. Listeners remembered it longer. She revised less afterward. As listening stretches on, repetition feels unnecessary. There was a mill cleaner named Radu who swept floors repeatedly. One evening, he swept once and left. The mill remained. He rested sooner. As the night deepens, completeness arrives early. There was a candle trimmer named Suki who trimmed wicks daily. One wick burned unevenly. The room was still warm. She stopped trimming so often. As listening continues, warmth matters more than form. There was a translator named Paulo who worried about nuance. One translation was simpler. It was understood. He relaxed. As the night moves on, simplicity suffices. There was a watchmaker named Antero who checked springs constantly. One spring was left unchecked. The watch ticked. He smiled. As listening deepens, smiling comes easily. There was a map painter named Linnea who corrected every line. One line stayed crooked. People liked it. She left more lines crooked. As the night stretches on, crookedness feels human. There was a glass blower named Stephanique who reheated pieces repeatedly. One piece cooled early. It held. He rested his hands. As listening continues, cooling feels safe. There was a night porter named Milo who carried bags quickly. One bag was set down early. The traveler did not mind. Milo felt relief. As the night deepens, relief replaces urgency. There was a teacher named Renuka who filled every silence. One silence remained. The room softened. She paused more often afterward. As listening stretches on, silence is welcomed. There was a bridge sweeper named Olav who cleaned nightly. One night, he skipped. The bridge stood. He skipped again. As the night moves on, skipping feels allowed. There was a baker named Selena who worried about texture. One batch differed. It was enjoyed. She stopped worrying. As listening deepens, enjoyment stands alone. There was a poet named Nile who chased meaning. One poem made no sense. People felt it anyway. He stopped chasing. As the night stretches on, feeling replaces explanation. There was a wool dyer named Farah who measured pigments carefully. One batch varied. The color was loved. She trusted her eye. As listening continues, measurement loosens. There was a night clerk named Ivo who checked locks repeatedly. One check was missed. Nothing happened. He checked less. As the night deepens, nothing happening is enough. There was a river sounder named Katya who listened for changes. One night, she slept. The river flowed. She slept again. As listening stretches on, flow needs no witness. There was a sign painter named Dusan who corrected spacing endlessly. One sign stayed imperfect. People found their way. He smiled. As the night continues, direction remains without precision. There was a weaver named May who tightened every thread. One cloth was looser. It draped beautifully. She loosened more often. As listening deepens, softness prevails. There was a porter named Zeno who braced under weight. One evening, he adjusted the load. it felt lighter. He breathed easier. As the night moves on, adjustment replaces strain. There was a tea brewer named Akiko who timed steeping carefully. One cup steeped longer. It was calming. She stopped watching the clock. As listening stretches on, calm replaces timing. There was a letter sorter named Raulito who worried about order. One pile mixed. The letters reached their homes. He rested. As the night deepens, arrival happens without sorting. There was a bell listener named Etta who listened for cracks. One bell cracked. It soothed her. She listened differently after that. As listening continues, listening itself changes. There was a traveler named Sven who once asked how to know when to stop walking. The answer was simple. When you stop carrying, the elder said. Sven stopped. The ground held him. And now, as this night continues, without needing to move forward, nothing more is being asked. Nothing more is being carried. The stories are no longer stories. They are simply quiet movements passing through. The night remains, and we remain without effort, without direction, without holding anything at all. As the night moves on, there is very little distinction left between listening and simply being here. The words do not arrive as information. They arrive like distant sounds, not asking to be followed. Nothing is unfolding toward an end. Nothing is being prepared. There was once a woman named Therese who tended a narrow canal in a quiet town. Each day, she checked the water level, adjusting small gates to keep the flow even. She believed steadiness was her responsibility. If the water rose too high, she worried. If it fell too low, she hurried to correct it. At night, she dreamed of overflowing banks and dry stone beds. One evening, after a long day, she forgot to close one gate. She noticed only in the morning the water had flowed differently overnight. Some reeds leaned. Some stones were newly visible. Nothing was damaged. The canal looked softer. From that day on, Therese adjusted less often. She learned the canal could carry itself through small imbalances. As the night continues, the idea of balance loses its sharp edges. Nothing needs to be perfectly level. There was a glass polisher named Vittoria who spent her days smoothing surfaces until they reflected clearly. She believed clarity meant effort. One evening, her hands tired, she stopped before finishing. The glass reflected the room in a slightly blurred way. She looked at it for a long time. The blur felt gentle. She stopped polishing everything to a shine. As listening deepens, clarity becomes less important than ease. There was a pathkeeper named Narek who removed fallen leaves each morning. He believed paths should be visible. One autumn, leaves fell faster than he could clear them. He stopped trying. People still walked the path, feeling their way. Some slowed. Some smiled. The path remained. As the night stretches on, visibility no longer feels urgent. We do not need to see where this is going. There was a woman named Colette who practiced smiling in the mirror before gatherings. She wanted to appear warm. One evening, she arrived without practicing. Her smile came when it came. People felt it. She stopped rehearsing afterward. As listening continues, effort to appear softens. Nothing needs to be presented. There was a baker named Stellan who followed recipes precisely. He feared deviation. One day, missing an ingredient, he baked anyway. The bread tasted different, but good. He trusted himself more after that. As the night deepens, trust replaces precision. There was a bell cleaner named Thomasina who polished bells until they shone. One bell was left dull. Its sound was unchanged. She cleaned less often. As listening stretches on, surface loses importance. What matters continues quietly. There was a letter carrier named Hiegin who memorized routes carefully. One day, she took a wrong turn. She arrived later, but arrived. No one complained. She stopped fearing mistakes. As the night moves on, mistakes lose their weight. There was a man named Oscar who watched his breathing closely during rest. He believed calm required control. One night, exhausted, he stopped watching. Sleep came quickly. He did not monitor again. As listening deepens, even awareness relaxes. There was a stone stacker named Benoit who balanced rocks by the shore. She adjusted endlessly. One stack was left untouched. It stood through the tide. She walked away. As the night stretches on, walking away feels natural. There was a seam ripper named Nadav who undid stitches quickly at the first flaw. One garment was left slightly crooked. It was worn often. He stopped undoing so much. As listening continues, imperfection becomes acceptable. There was a map reader named Ilaria who traced routes carefully. One journey, she folded the map away. She followed the road. She arrived. As the night deepens, guidance becomes optional. There was a librarian named Pavelka who tracked silence carefully. She hushed every sound. One afternoon, a laugh echoed through the shelves. It faded on its own. She smiled and said nothing. As listening stretches on, silence no longer needs protection. There was a water bearer named Rami who balanced jars with tension. One evening, he loosened his grip. The jars settled. His shoulders dropped. As the night moves on, the body learns it can release. There was a potter named Sina who centered clay firmly. She pressed hard. One day, she pressed gently. The clay responded. She pressed gently thereafter. As listening deepens, gentleness becomes the default. There was a watchkeeper named Elzbieta who checked mechanisms hourly. One night, she slept through an hour. The watch continued. She slept more after that. As the night stretches on, continuity no longer feels fragile. There was a woman named Keiko who organized drawers meticulously. One drawer stayed disordered. She found what she needed anyway. She left it that way. As listening continues, order loosens. There was a shepherd named Dario who counted sheep nightly. One night he stopped counting. He slept. The sheep remained. As the night deepens, reassurance fades. There was a metal worker named Svenja who cooled pieces carefully. One piece cooled unevenly. It held. She trusted the process. As listening stretches on, process replaces control. There was a bridge watcher named Alphonse who listened for creaks. One creak went unnoticed. The bridge stood. He listened less. As the night moves on, alertness rests. There was a woman named Priyanka who planned meals days ahead. One day, she cooked what was available. It was satisfying. She planned less. As listening deepens, spontaneity feels safe. There was a candle maker named Janos who trimmed every wick. One candle burned long without trimming. The room was warm. He rested. As the night stretches on, warmth becomes enough. There was a signpost painter named Eulalia who repainted faded letters. One sign stayed faded. Travelers still found their way. She let it fade. As listening continues, guidance remains without emphasis. There was a weaver named Chandra who tightened patterns firmly. One cloth loosened. It draped beautifully. She smiled. As the night deepens, beauty feels unforced. There was a guard named Lucan who walked rounds precisely. One night, he shortened the route. Nothing changed. He rested more. As listening stretches on, duty softens. There was a tea server named Yara who measured leaves carefully. One cup was brewed loosely. It was comforting. She stopped measuring. As the night moves on, comfort replaces correctness. There was a book editor named Marek who corrected endlessly. One page went to print uncorrected. Readers enjoyed it. He rested his pen. As listening deepens, completion does not require perfection. There was a rope bridge tender named Hilda who tightened cables daily. One day, She skipped. The bridge held. She trusted it more. As the night stretches on, structures feel stable without attention. There was a gardener named Riku who watered on schedule. One night, rain came unexpectedly. He slept. The garden drank. As listening continues, timing becomes irrelevant. There was a performer named Ansel who rehearsed bows carefully. One performance ended without one. The applause came anyway. He bowed less afterward. As the night deepens, acknowledgement is not sought. There was a doorkeeper named Saburo who opened and closed quietly. One door stayed open. The room felt airy. He left it that way. As listening stretches on, openness replaces closure. There was a shoemaker named Liesel who polished shoes daily. One pair stayed dull. They were worn happily. She polished less. As the night moves on, usefulness outweighs shine. There was a traveler named Noor who once asked when to stop preparing. The answer was simple. When you are already here. No explanation followed. As the night continues now, preparation has already ended. Nothing is coming next. Nothing needs to. The words may still arrive, or they may fade. Either way, they are no longer held. The night carries everything easily. And here, without effort, without direction, without a single thing to remember, we rest inside it. As the night gently thins toward its quiet edge, there is nothing new to introduce, only a soft looking back. We have moved together through many small lives, hands that once held too tightly, eyes that once watched too carefully, minds that slowly learned they did not need to manage the dark. Nothing dramatic happened, nothing needed to. Again and again, we saw the same simple truth from different angles. When holding loosens, life does not fall apart. It settles. The river flowed whether it was watched or not. The bread rose without alarms. The paths remained even when leaves covered them. What changed was not the world. It was the grip. If you notice now that pieces of the night are missing, that is not a problem. If names have blurred, stories overlapped, or meanings slipped away, that is exactly as it should be. This was never about collecting understanding. It was about allowing weight to drop. At some point, effort stopped being useful, and without being told to, it simply faded. If sleep has already come and gone in waves, that is fine. If you are still listening, that is fine too. There is no correct ending to this night. We do not need to gather the stories back up. They have already finished their work by passing through. Now the emphasis naturally shifts from listening to resting, from understanding to letting the body take over. Breath continues on its own. The body knows how to sink. The night knows how to hold. Nothing more is required of you. If sleep is arriving now, you do not need to greet it. If wakefulness remains, you do not need to push it away. Both belong to the same letting go. The night is wide. It does not rush you. It does not ask for anything in return. Whatever is still being held can soften in its own time. Whatever has already loosened does not need to be checked. We have come as far as we needed to come simply by staying. And now, whether awareness fades completely or lingers gently at the edge, the journey is already complete. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Calm Monk.